Thank you, Matt, and welcome everybody. Whether you are watching and listening with concentration, whether you've got us on in the background, whether you're cleaning your bin, tidying your desk, or bribing your children with biscuits, which is pretty much where I've been the last 10 minutes, and we understand it, and we have you as part of this conversation. I don't know about you, but I am submerged with communication, reading the news, and last night in my sort of roundup of the news, I read a quote that had quite a big impact on me, a Lenin quote from 1912. There are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. And I'm certainly feeling that myself over the last couple of weeks. Before I go on and introduce myself and Wil in a little bit more detail, a welcome to this webinar, but also obviously recognition of this surreal universe we're living in. A blurring of all aspects of our life, a very real worry about health and the economy, society at large, coupled with hopefully some touching moments where we understand what really matters. And we'll have all read things recently that have had an impact on us, none more so than this extract that I'm just going to read out to you in a moment, which I found in my little boy's bedroom last week. He's 6, and I was naively hoping that some of this was washing over him. I found this. It said, so first, I have to tell you about the coronavirus. It started by a bat in China. The Olympics is shut down until 2021. More than 1 million people are ill. Even England's president has it. All the schools have been shut down. Some people can travel, and hopefully I can go to France on holiday. Wash your hands all the time, and you need to look after your kids. And it just got me. It got me thinking about the impact and the widespread impact of this, and also a nice quote I'd seen on some social media last week about be careful in our desperation to get back to normal, that we think about what aspects of normal we're desperate to get back to. So enough of the scene setting from what we might have considered a few weeks ago to be a dystopian future and back to some reality. My name's Natalie, and I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague and friend, Dr. Wil James. I work in a house at the moment with my husband and 2 small children. We do our best at homeschooling, but I'm not sure what Ofsted would think about it all. In my role at Lane 4, I'm a consultant director. Spend a lot of my time working with clients on change, engagement, and have a particular interest in communication and the leader's role as a communicator. And Wil, tell us a little bit about yourself before we move on to the detail of our webinar today.
Thank you, Natalie. Great to be here. I'm noticing as I listen to your lovely anecdote, again, how it makes us all stop and think, hopefully, a little bit more about what we're doing. And my background is elite sport, and that was fast and furious. As a sports psychologist supporting teams, it was always about the next competition, the next result, and sometimes the bigger picture didn't always land. Look, I'm like you. I'm juggling home and work and family. I've got 2 teenagers, adjusting to balancing school and non-work. I think the holidays are a bit of a blessing because at least they now know they've got an excuse. They can say, no, we're not working because it's the Easter holiday. I think my role in Lane 4 is now, very much in solution design, and won't surprise anyone to realise that our offering now is gone from sort of 20% virtual to 100% virtual, and it's helping us to really move forward fast in that space. And we feel we've got some great opportunities to support people. Personally, the topic today around resilience and well-being, as a sports psychologist previously, yeah, very, very relevant to me. And there's some parallels, but I think I'm really trying to focus today on the world we are in our business context. So looking forward to it.
Thank you. And before we move on to some strategies around resilience and how we as leaders can think about how we prioritise team resilience, we have been over the last couple of weeks running a series of webinars. We've been asking questions about the specifics of the challenges people are facing, and we'll feed that into future content. So it'd be great if you can answer this question. Click the link in the chat box, enter the relevant code to feed in the biggest challenge you're facing in your leadership at the moment. We've talked about some of the broad things, some specific things that we could support you with. It would be great to hear. I'll try and cover off some of them throughout the webinar, and if not, they will feed into future sessions. But we all know that leadership is littered with managing tensions, competing and significant tensions at the moment, of course. But even in business as usual, we talk often with our customers about this future versus current tension. How do you plan for the future as well as operationalize what you're doing? We often talk about the tension between needing to be creative and innovative and efficient ways of. I don't know about you, but with the tension in the current context, these tensions are tighter, harder, and more acute. And resilience is certainly a term that is being thrown around a lot at the moment. We notice it, we need it, people need to think about it. I'd like to ask Wil, a psychologist, a performance psychologist, to initially just define it for us. What is resilience, Wil?
Well, let's take you through a few slides just to help bring that to life. And I think you're right, it's something that we're all using a lot, we're talking a lot about. And I think the first thing we have to do when it comes to resilience, well-being, stress, pressure is to normalise it. And I think that's easy in today's day and age. I think people are happy having those conversations. Certainly when I worked in elite sport, it wasn't always easy helping people to face up to the fact that they might have stresses and pressures. You know, they wanted to be seen as resilient and tough and didn't need that. And certainly in business, I've had similar situation as well, where people feel that, you know, they don't succumb to stress and pressure. I think that's reducing nowadays. I think the second point is very much that having accepted that for all sorts of reasons, or helping people to accept, I should say, that people's performance or their well-being doesn't follow a straight line over time, doesn't improve, doesn't get better necessarily, it does go up and down. And resilience really is that ability to lessen the negative impact of stresses and pressures. So if we are working on ourselves or working with our teams, how do we stop that level of well-being, level of performance dropping because of stresses and pressures? So the dark blue curves on this graph in front of you is what we're trying to prevent, and certainly the light blue curve where people will have more significant issues that may occur because of a drop in well-being suddenly turns into something more sinister, more serious. So resilience is that ability to overcome that and overcome those negative effects. I think the other thing to recognise and remind ourselves of, and those who were on the webinar last week will be appreciative of this, our capability to lessen that impact of negative the pressures and negativity that's around us will come from our resilience recipe. And at Lane 4, our research and our experience would suggest that recipe comes from ingredients under the following headings: mind, body, and environment. And those three key areas are critical. And we might have focused more on mind and body last week. We won't ignore them today, but we'll focus more on the environment side today as managers, as leaders of teams. How are we helping ourselves, firstly, to make sure we've got the environment set up around us to be resilient and well-being, but also fundamentally, how are we contributing to our team members' environment, whether they are at work, whether they're furloughed, whatever the situation might be. So fundamentally, that's what we're trying to do in terms of look at resilience. I suppose the final thing to say, the fourth thing maybe at this point, is that resilience recipes can be both proactive and reactive. And I think the proactive is, what are we doing in advance of a slump in performance or mood to minimise that impact? We know we might have a very busy, hectic or uncertain time coming up ahead of us. What are we doing proactively to make sure that we've got that our routines or our schedules set up to minimise the negative impact of that? So, for me, it will be having some clear time set aside for exercise, making sure just because I'm working from home and not commuting, I don't miss out on the normal habits of sleep and recovery. And again, making sure that I'm not missing out on regular team check-ins. And my team is changing, my projects are changing, so I have to keep on top of that proactively. Reactively then, we all will find ourselves in a bit of a slump or in a bit of a spiral at some point. Our mood takes a bit of a dive, the basics really, but I think it's easy to say, not easy to do. But, just that getting up, taking a break, getting out into the garden, looking up, maybe then picking up the phone to someone different or talking to a family member about something different, distracting you, or indeed talking about one of your team members about the issue, but in a different way to help make sense of it. So proactive and reactive recipes for resilience based around mind, body, environment, and recognizing that that's something that we're trying to minimize the negative impact of stress and pressure.
Thanks, Wil. What we've been doing over the last couple of weeks is gathering questions, just like we're trying to do from everyone listening to this session today. We've got one in front of us here, which I'm going to ask Wil to answer in a moment. But first of all, I'm going to feed in a couple of questions that are coming through the participant chat and sort of build them into this. There's some recognition that managing uncertainty, people's uncertainty for the future is a real challenge for people. I know Wil's going to cover that off shortly. And the recognition that people can't, how do you be visible for your team, not just through the task conversations? You lose some of that ability to read body language, etc. So Wil, what's your advice on maintaining teams' well-being, noticing that we've got all these sort of competing and complex challenges? What tools are available?
Yeah, it's not easy, but I think it's great to face into it. It's great to look at it. That the first thing I would always ask leaders, managers, anyone to be is with a small s, to be a bit strategic about it. So rather than just act, is to stop and think and try and understand a bit about what's going on. So in being strategic, we first come up with a diagnosis and then we make a plan and then we act. I think dealing with individuals, you can almost apply the same thing. Of course, it's done in a smaller way. To help us be more strategic, to help us diagnose what's going on, understand what's going on for our people rather than assume. There are a number of things out there that help. I think particularly using the SCARF model, the work of David Rock, and we've certainly applied it and developed it in our thinking at Lane 4, and to help really get a sense of, well, why is someone responding, or why might they be responding in a certain way, or how might they respond to a certain situation going forward if you know them well. So just for those who are not familiar with David Rock's work and with the SCARF model here, just to give you a flavour of this. So, it wouldn't be unusual for someone to think that they've been furloughed is a mark of status, that they're not as good as those who haven't been furloughed. And that's something that, again, we've got to recognise is very much a reality out there, and we've got to help in our comms and the way we talk to people and the way we explain things to people, that maybe that can help minimise that status threat that they might be feeling. Hopefully, similarly, if we get the communication right, we'll mitigate someone's particular threat response, which might be around fairness. So, not really understanding the process of furlough, not understanding how selections were made for that. Certainly in the world of sport, to minimise the fairness trigger going off for people when they were deselected. Really, we're here to make sure that people were involved and kept up to speed with that process. So they felt that it reduced the impact of it being unfair. Certainty is the one that you mentioned earlier on, Natalie, and we'll come and talk about this, I'm sure, as we go through here. And this is a tough one in a time of constant change. I mean, you and I were talking just before this about projects that we were planning 2 weeks ago that then changed at the beginning of this week, and probably going into next week will change again. So giving people absolute certainty, and most of us crave and need some of that, is tough. But I think we have to help people here to think about what can be certain for them around their schedules, their routines, other areas of their life, what they believe and what their values are, how they want to be, recontract them about how we work with them, which essentially is a combination of giving people autonomy, making sure we don't force things on people, but it does give people a sense of normality or a sense of routine, which hopefully will provide some at least short-term certainty. I think the relatedness, Nat, you and I, again, have had good experience of this in our own business where, the narrative around furloughing, for example, is very much about we're all in the squad, some of us on the pitch, some of us on the bench, and helping people feel still belonging and a sense of relatedness to the business is critical. And what we can do as managers to help people, feel that they have an important role to play on the bench if they're not involved, or indeed if they're on the pitch, what they're now doing is critical, right? So I don't know if there's anything that you highlight there, Natalie, but
a couple of reflections, because of course I'm a consultant and I work with you, but at the time I'm a human and I'm experiencing this stuff. First of all, the recognition of the communication we've had about this one squad mentality has been so powerful. Naturally, you might expect us at Lane 4 to be sort of brought into a sports metaphor, and there are times it works, there are times where it's less impactful, but it's certainly working for us now to think about who's on the pitch, and just a powerful picture of what we're still trying to achieve together. So that's been a fantastic communications approach, which drives relatedness. Another thing I've noticed personally, certainty feels important for me. Generally, well, you know, I'm not the only person. That's why these are typical threat responses. What I've started to have to accept, and hopefully I'm working through it with my team as well, is that we can't have certainty, and I've had to be a little bit more comfortable, or I'm training myself to be more comfortable with uncertainty. And actually, frankly, with chaos, it's how you respond to chaos and progress through it that seems to be important at the moment. And certainly my land manager is working with us in that way as well. So yes, there's some of my reflections.
Yeah, good. And listen, I think it's very valid, and I think, again, reiterates that even if we're managing others, we have to stop and relate to ourselves and ask ourselves the question, why might I be feeling this way? It helps keep us normal. It will helps us then empathise a lot more with our team members. If you're not into models and frameworks, or frankly, if you want to take that to another level, fully understand that, this is something, again, that we find can be really useful to. And some of us, if you've worked with us in our workshops, you may have seen us use this in the past. I think it can work really well in teams as well. So just allowing people to consider, you know, who they might be at the moment on that particular mood mountain and why. And so make sure when you're checking in with people, if you want to give rather than ask the obvious question, how are you? You know, who are you? And what is it that you're, you know, what is it that's causing you to feel that way? And are there things I can do to help, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you said, Natalie, before we came on, you said you could be any one of those this week. In fact, you've been all of those this week. I don't know whether it's fair to ask you now where you feel you are, but it does feel a roller coaster for us at the moment.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's absolutely fair. I mean, because I'm fully in task focus, I've got minimized distractions around me because I'm in this moment. I actually feel very in control of sort of the next 15, 16 minutes. As I'm sure all of you are dealing with, this sort of barrage of information and communication from all sorts. You know, of course, in the back of my mind, I'll have what will be happening on my email after this. But certainly today, because of some of these strategies, and I'm not saying I'm a perfect model for it, I feel in a good place. What advice are we giving to line managers? People, are we asking people to tune into where their team is, to talk to people, to use this as a tool?
Yeah, so as a way of getting being part of the supportive network, being part of help for people, I think it can be really useful. Just and again, the image, this could be an image, but it could be, you can do it in many other ways. We're just trying to connect with people at a slightly different level, and when we're doing it virtually, you know, as someone said, we can't read body language, so getting people to describe it in terms of through one of these characters might be useful. I mean,
we just had a quick question, Will. Somebody's asked if we can download this so that they can use it as a tool. Absolutely. Yeah. A couple of somebody has pointed out that the mountain looks like a day in the life of a business leader. More so now than ever, I'm imagining. So yeah, of course, we can share these copies. It's a great tool for having a real conversation about how people are feeling.
And in terms of how we help people, look, we don't ignore that people might need help with their emotions. They might need help, you know, refocusing. They might need help being encouraged to look after themselves physically during lockdown. I think what we said we'd focus on today is a little bit more around the environment piece and what am I doing there. It reminds me of some research and work I was doing when I was working in elite sport, where typically you're thinking, how do I get an young elite athlete to be even better and to really be successful? I know what we'll do. We'll remove them from their normal environment. We'll put them in a school of excellence and really, really cram them full of brilliant stuff to help them. Of course, what that ends up doing is giving them a lot of focus, but in one single direction. And when you look at all the research that's out there that helps people to understand, how do I deal with transitions? How do I deal with changing times? How do I thrive in that space? It's actually having a multiple avenues of support, not just through your one discipline. So for those workaholics out there, those people who've put all their time and effort in one direction, I'm afraid it's time to really, well, the opportunity now is to really start to connect in with different groups, and almost different social identities. The research is as powerful as saying if you have more than 5 social identities, so members of 5 different groups, it can make a family, some work, but also out of work stuff as well, you have a significant increased chance of dealing with major life events and transitions, because you can call on different people at different times and you get sources of support from different people at different times. In the sport world, again, if I put all my eggs in one basket and I have a really bad day at sport, I've got nowhere to turn. I just feel rubbish about myself. Whereas if I can go home and do something different, if I can go out in the evening and do something different, if I can connect online nowadays and do something different with a different group and get a different sense of support, social support is what we're talking about predominantly here, but it can be other things as well, then that all helps my well-being. More specifically then, building on that connecting for support, gaining clarity, we've talked about it with the certainty piece. It is really important that we are continually asking ourselves, what am I trying to be doing here? What really matters? What's expected of me? And help our team not feel embarrassed asking those questions, Natalie. I mean, it's something that we've had to almost be deliberate with, I think, in our work recently, because people have been changing roles on just different projects and everything. So really important, right? The final bit for me on this one is maybe, and again, through the virtual mediums in which we're now communicating, don't put pressure on yourself to just always see yourself as the leader and manager, but facilitate conversations. Try and generate responsibility in your team members, in your team as a whole. What do they want to do? How do they want it to be? My boss this morning talked to us as a team about, we want to determine our rules of engagement for the next few weeks. We've got some of us at work, we've got 1 or 2 furloughed. Let's collectively think about our rules for engagement. And it doesn't have to be down to the manager or the leader setting the rules, setting the ways, the methods. And I'm sure most of you listening will be cued into that. So we'll move on to the next question, Natalie, I think. And you have some context for this one.
Absolutely. And I've been checking some of the questions as well coming through. So I want to make sure we're responding to our audience. One of the questions in here is a lot of my team are youngsters and they're cooped up perhaps in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment on their own. Is there any advice? I can share some of the stuff we've been doing at Lane 4, not necessarily directly for that audience, but for any people who are not on the pitch at the moment, that we've got an online social community. So we've got a series of activities happening for people who are furloughed or not furloughed. They include meditation, book club, lunch club, meaningful conversations with people, and they're not about work. They're not involved in tactical day-to-day work conversations, but they are without doubt still part of a bigger community, and we're making sure that they feel that way. I'm going to turn to you again now, Wil, and just ask you, what advice you've got about, this question on the screen really. I mean, I'm sure we all have experienced those moments where your child runs in, your 2 phones are going, your Microsoft Teams going, your Zoom is going, Skype's going. How do we manage sudden anxiety rushes?
Well, let's look at it again from a proactive and reactive position. So proactively, look, don't forget that obvious one, but it's easy said, not easily done. To recontract around your availability with your boss, with your manager, and as a boss and a manager, recontract with your teams. When are they best available? When, it may well be that people are more comfortable working into the evening if they are having to sort of share home care with their partner. So for me, it's critical that we do that. And even if you're single and living on your own, actually, are we expecting people do we need people to be working, in the normal working hours? There is some lovely sunshine. If people need to get out for hours exercise, can we recontract around how that might look and not assume that people will naturally do that? If you are living with people, then families and or flatmates, housemates, whatever, then just agreeing routines with people you live with, so that you're not both trying to use the broadband at the same time, maybe in the same way, or you're finding ways in which you're both going to switch off at the same time. The no-brainers, but again, as a manager, as a leader, how are you encouraging people to have these conversations? And again, fundamentally for you and for your team, making sure that people are scheduling exercise, downtime. I certainly I don't know what you've been like, Natalie, but I find it all too easy to be at my desk for far longer than I would normally be, because you're interacting with a screen, a headset, and before you know it, I'm actually doing less exercise now, but bizarrely, I normally have an hour and a half commute each way. I'm doing less exercise at the moment than I would be doing if I was in a normal situation. So I've got to be proactive in that space. And that will help mitigate mood and retain my sense of well-being. Reactively, again, this isn't unique to the situations that we're in now. This would apply at all at any stage. But that ability to notice your emotional state and just stop and think, like, how am I actually feeling right now? What am I noticing that's going on? As soon as we can do that, we can help ourselves and help other people. Once we've done that, don't expect to think your way out of it. So don't just work harder, don't just sit and think or talk more, but actually take a break. That could be 5 minutes, make yourself a cup of tea or coffee. It could be taking a walk. It could be just going out to the garden, looking up at the trees, which again can be really give you a very different perspective. And if and when you're ready to get back into work, before you come back into that meeting, that situation, whatever it is, just ask yourself, write stuff down. What is it that we're trying to do here? What is it that's important? People hear me say a lot at Lane 4 about chunking up to the bigger purpose. What actually are we trying to achieve here? So for me, don't just walk back in having calmed yourself down, because it will come straight back. Take that last bit of time just to think about, actually, what is it I'm trying to be achieving and how will I get there?
I've just reflecting on what you're saying, Wil. I don't suggest this is the normal that anyone wants to continue with, but every cloud, etc. And one of the things I've noticed is I know more about my colleagues' life over the last 3 weeks, the way they live their life, their family members, than I ever had done before. And I work in an organisation where actually we get on really well and we have these level of conversations. I now know my colleague Tom's dog. I chat to the dog. Edward knows my son. I'm surprised he's not charging in now to tell me or to tell you all his match attack stickers have gone missing. And I'm embracing that, because this is who we are. We're real people and we're all dealing with that. And I was going to, I think the next question, Wil, I was going to sort of ask and answer myself, really, because we started to notice that it was related a bit to some of the things are related to communication. So how do I manage the needs of individuals against managing my team as a whole? I could easily say effective communication. There we go. We've got the slide there. What I have noticed over the last couple of weeks is, gosh, aren't we relying on saying effective communication? And it is being used even more so as the catch-all solution to everything. By the way, I'm not suggesting it's not, but I think we need to interrogate it further. And actually, I'm hoping to see it normalising a bit in a few weeks, because I would actually say that there certainly is a lot of over-informationing at the moment. It is coming from everywhere. And actually, I'm not sure that it is true that you can't not over-communicate. I think that we're seeing a bit of that because we're in this new context. So what we've started to talk to some of our clients about, and certainly within Lane 4, is recognising that there'll be different characteristics of good communication purposes. So at an organisational level, we need something visionary and regular, reliable and honest, and lots of it needs to be CEO-led. We're getting that at Lane 4, plus a daily COVID-19 update. So we know when it comes, and we know that Adrian is leading the broader communication. This stuff in the middle between organisation and individual is this stuff with newly forming teams within your own team. So newly forming or cross-functional teams, actually the characteristics of great communication there might be succinct, collaborative, tight emails, very few people getting copied, 20-minute meetings rather than an hour. With your team, of course, you need to get that balance right of the social and emotional cohesion along with the task cohesion. And at individual level, and people have alluded to it on the question, so important to have the real conversations. That balance between absolutely we need to get this stuff done. And I think someone had written the question here about the challenge of performance, driving performance and considering well-being at the same time. And we've done some research recently into leadership mindsets. And one of the 5 mindsets we've explored is this thing about being ruthlessly caring. And that's a paradox for us all as leaders. And I think that's totally true now. You have to acknowledge that we have to make tough decisions, but remain compassionate, and it's a constant tension for us.
Yeah, and listen, I just noticed again on the comments, and Hayley's put a comment down around that really, which is, well, how do I do that maybe? How do I be ruthlessly caring when I'm trying to manage the different priorities of home and everything else and communication? Just using the must do, should do, could do and won't do, Moscow as a prioritization methodology can be really useful in this time. So again, being deliberate with some of that can be really helpful. I'm conscious of time, Natalie, and I know we're running close to our cut-off, so shall I move us on to the summary?
Yeah, so I'll give a quick summary, and we will endeavour to answer questions and write a summary of this. Minds at ease. So summary, think about your team's mind, body and environment, those 3 anchors of resilience that Wil talked about earlier. Consider your own and your team, so have conversations with your teams about They are proactive and reactive strategies, resilient strategies. Get under the skin of your teams, each individual's typical emotional responses to situations. So that's that SCARF model. Is somebody predisposed, for example, to be particularly by fairness? People have triggers. What are they? And can you use the SCARF model to come up with a common language that makes it easier to talk about those? And finally, before I head back to Wil, if I've missed anything, consider your communication carefully. I mean, somebody has pointed out that we're seeing communication as a symptom of underlying behaviours. I think we're seeing so much communication that is well-intentioned but not necessarily thought through, because people are just dealing with this, dare I say it, new normal. So it certainly needs to be considered in more detail. Well,
yeah, all I'd say at the end is look, great summary, Nat, and great interaction from the group. I just think what we can't do is force people to be well or force people to deal with things in a certain way. We can only put opportunities their way, and so don't beat yourself up as managers and leaders. I've seen some great suggestions on the chat about things that people are already doing. Hopefully we've sparked your interest and given you a few more thoughts, or just reinforced that some of the things you're doing will be helping. But I think, just providing opportunities and asking that question, what else can I do? What else can we do? Realizing it won't ever be perfect in this world that changes every week.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.